Evelyn Monroe stood at gate B12 holding a boarding pass that said Group 1, First Class in bold capital letters. The terminal buzzed with voices, wheels on tile, polite boarding calls echoing every few minutes. But none of that mattered. She didn't hear it. Not really. She had been through this before, too many times to count, and yet it never lost its sting. She looked like any successful, composed woman in her late 40s, well-groomed, minimal makeup, a clean navy cardigan, slacks, and a pair of sensible flats. She held a simple black tote bag with her initials engraved in silver. She looked like someone who knew where she was going and how she got there. But for some people, appearance has nothing to do with professionalism. For some people, skin tone is a problem they think they need to solve. The gate agent was young. Polished. Polite in the way that feels practiced. She smiled at the white couple ahead of Evelyn, took their passes, and waved them through with a warm, "Enjoy your flight." But when Evelyn stepped forward, the smile faltered. The gate agent didn't take the pass right away. She looked Evelyn up and down and tilted her head like something didn't quite add up. Then came the question Evelyn had heard before. It always came wrapped in false curiosity. "Hi there," the agent said. "Are you sure you're in the right line?" Evelyn said nothing at first. She handed over the boarding pass and met the woman's gaze, steady and unshaken. "I am," she replied. No extra words. No attempt to explain herself. The gate agent steadied the pass as if it had misprinted itself. She said, dragging the syllable longer than necessary. "I'm going to need to double-check this." Evelyn didn't flinch. She stepped to the side, quietly, while 3 other passengers behind her, all white, all clearly in a rush, were waved through without a blink. Then came another employee, this one in a blazer and badge. He took a glance at Evelyn and didn't even ask questions. He just assumed something was wrong. "Can we verify your identification, ma'am?" Evelyn handed him her license and passport. He took them, walked over to a small monitor, typed something in, then looked back at her, his brow furrowed. "Wait right here," he said. A minute passed. Then 2. Then 5. People began whispering. A few looked her way, some with confusion, some with pity, and some with that smug little smirk that says, "I knew it." A child asked her mother, "Why won't they let her on?" The mother didn't answer. The gate agent returned with a forced smile. "We're just experiencing a system error," she said, her voice too sweet, too fake. "It's probably a mismatch with your booking profile." Evelyn raised an eyebrow. "Is there a problem with the name Evelyn Monroe?" The agent blinked. "No, of course not. We just weren't expecting, never mind." There it was. The sentence she didn't finish said more than anything else. "We weren't expecting someone who looks like you." She had seen this game before. Change the reason. Keep the disrespect. More passengers were called to board. One man, a businessman in a gray suit, stepped in front of Evelyn and handed over his pass. The gate agent beamed at him and waved him through. Evelyn was still waiting. Then came the second escalation. "We're going to need to inspect your bag," the man in the blazer said. "Why?" Evelyn asked. "Random protocol," he replied. Evelyn looked at him, long and cold. "You've let 10 people board since I got here. Not one of them had their bag inspected." The man shrugged. "Ma'am, if you're unwilling to comply." "I didn't say that," Evelyn interrupted. She opened her tote slowly. Inside, a MacBook, a leather folder, a pen, a travel book, and her glasses case. Neat. Organized. Innocent. He searched the bag anyway. Fingers brushing through her belongings like she didn't exist. When he found nothing, he zipped it up and handed it back without looking her in the eyes. "That'll be fine," he said, as if he were granting her mercy. But still, no one waved her through. Instead, the gate agent picked up the phone. Whispered something. Looked Evelyn's way. A third person arrived, this one from airport security. We're just trying to clarify some things, he said. Evelyn stared at him. You're escalating this because of a boarding pass. That says first class. With my name. And my ID. We understand, he said. But our system doesn't recognize you as a regular traveler. That was it. That was the sentence that peeled the layer back completely. Not a regular traveler. Translation, you don't look like the type of person who flies first class. And still, Evelyn said nothing. Because she knew that her silence said more than their accusations ever could. She turned slightly, her voice even. Do I look like a threat? The agent hesitated. Do I look like someone who can't afford a ticket? She asked again. I didn't say that. You didn't have to. The man stepped back. He wasn't ready for her composure. He had expected anger, frustration, shouting. He had expected the kind of scene they could label as disruptive. What he got instead was dignity so sharp it cut the room in half. From inside the plane, a flight attendant emerged. She looked between the gate agent and Evelyn. Is there a problem? She asked. The gate agent's voice faltered. She's being reviewed. For what? For flying, Evelyn answered. The flight attendant stepped forward. Ma'am, do you have a first-class ticket? Evelyn held it out again. The flight attendant read it. Then looked at the gate agent. Why hasn't she boarded? The gate agent stammered. There was a confusion. There is no confusion, the flight attendant said. Please board, Ms. Monroe. Evelyn stepped past the rope. The gate agent flinched but said nothing. Not a word of apology. Not a glance of regret. And as Evelyn walked toward the jet bridge, she didn't look back. She didn't need to. Because the cameras were already rolling. Because the whispers were already spreading. Because some lessons don't need to be taught loudly to be heard clearly. She found her seat in 1A. Window. Leather. Quiet. A bottle of water already waiting. The flight attendant smiled, professional and kind. Is there anything I can get for you, Ms. Monroe? No, Evelyn said softly. This is enough. But it wasn't over. Not even close. Because this wasn't just a flight. This was an audit. She wasn't a passenger who got lucky. She was the one who signs the paychecks. She was the majority owner of the airline. And she had come today dressed as no one special because she wanted to see how her people were being treated. Now she knew. And the ones who had tried to remove her from the plane would soon learn what happens when the face you try to erase is the one that writes your future. They thought the flight would be quiet after takeoff. They thought the woman in seat 1A would keep to herself. That maybe, just maybe, once she was seated and the plane was in the air, all would be forgiven. Forgotten. Buried beneath 5 hours of altitude and a little turbulence. But dignity doesn't disappear at cruising altitude. And Evelyn Monroe wasn't built for forgetting. 30 minutes into the flight, the cabin lights dimmed. The hum of the engines blended with the occasional clink of glasses and the soft shuffle of flight attendants making rounds. Evelyn stared out the window, but her mind wasn't on the clouds. It was on the ground. At gate B12. On the faces of the people who made her prove she belonged in a seat she already paid for. It wasn't the first time. It wouldn't be the last. But this time, it mattered more. Because this wasn't just another business trip. This was the final leg of a private audit. One she had initiated months ago when she first suspected something wasn't right within the company culture of her newly acquired airline. Complaints from minority passengers. Reviews citing uncomfortable gate experiences. Whispers about microaggressions that always seemed to escalate when no one was watching. So she decided to watch. Herself. Quietly. From the ground up. No one on the flight knew who she was. Not the flight attendant who now offered her a warm towel. Not the man in seat 1B who had watched her get stopped at the gate without lifting a single finger. Not the pilots behind the locked door who flew the aircraft that carried her name on their uniforms. No one. That was the point. She'd made herself invisible on purpose. And now she had seen everything she needed to see. As the flight continued, word started to travel back through the cabin. One of the flight attendants had recognized her. Not as a celebrity, but from the company newsletter. From the leadership summit photos sent to all staff. The face behind the name no one expected. The name behind the company's quiet shift in direction. Evelyn Monroe. Majority shareholder. Strategic architect. Executive chairwoman. But it wasn't just the recognition that sparked whispers. It was the realization of what had just happened at the gate. The gate agents had delayed the owner of the airline for looking out of place. And now, they had a problem. A serious one. At cruising altitude, there's nowhere to hide. The news moved through the crew like a slow, rising fire. The purser whispered it to the head flight attendant. She took it to the captain. The captain called down to ground operations. And panic began to build, not in Evelyn, who remained calm, but in the people who realized they'd made a mistake they couldn't clean up with an apology and a voucher. Downstairs, in the airline's main office, a corporate crisis team had been activated. Someone had forwarded the video clip already circulating on social media. A black woman being delayed at the first-class gate. Soft voices saying things like, "We weren't expecting someone like you." Someone filmed her being questioned while white passengers boarded freely. Someone else had captioned it, "Guess who just made the biggest mistake of their career?" And then they tagged the airline. The post was gaining traction by the minute. Thousands of retweets. Comments piling up. News blogs beginning to reach out for statements. Back on the flight, Evelyn closed her eyes. She wasn't angry. She was exhausted. Exhausted from years of walking into rooms and proving she belonged. Of carrying twice the grace for half the respect. Of smiling when disrespected so no one could say she overreacted. But today, she didn't have to raise her voice. Her silence had already spoken volumes. When the flight landed in New York, she was the last to exit the plane. On purpose. She waited as every passenger disembarked. Some walked past her awkwardly. Some avoided eye contact. A few nodded slightly, as if to say, "We know. We saw. We didn't say anything, but we know now." She stood, gathered her bag, and stepped off the jet bridge into the terminal where 3 men in navy suits stood waiting. None of them spoke right away. Then one stepped forward. "Ms. Monroe," he said, nervous but professional. "We'd like to escort you to the executive lounge." She didn't blink. "Now you remember my name." He flinched. "Yes, ma'am. And on behalf of the entire airline, I want to express our deepest." She held up a hand. "Don't apologize here. Not in front of the cameras. Apologize in the boardroom." He nodded quickly. "We're ready when you are." The boardroom wasn't far. It sat on the mezzanine level above the main terminal, hidden behind smoked glass and access cards. Inside, the air was cool and silent. A long table. 12 seats. Only 3 were occupied when she arrived, but the rest filled quickly. Some had flown in just to be there. Because they had heard what happened. Because they knew what it meant. Evelyn didn't sit at the head of the table. She sat near the center. Let them come to her. When the final board member arrived, she opened the meeting with one sentence. "Tell me what my airline stands for." Silence. She repeated the question. Louder this time. "I want each of you to say, in one sentence, what this company represents." A man to her left cleared his throat. "We stand for global excellence in air travel." A woman near the end said, "For customer-first values and world-class hospitality." Someone else added, "Diversity. Inclusivity. Equity." Evelyn looked around. Then explained Gate B12. Silence again. She let it sit. Then, explain how a woman holding a valid first-class ticket was asked 3 times if she belonged. Explain how 3 white passengers were allowed to board without question while I was made to unpack my identity. A man across the table opened his mouth to speak, but Evelyn wasn't finished. This isn't just about one gate agent. Or one airport. This is about how you let people define luxury by the color of someone's skin. You made bias protocol. And you handed it out like a boarding pass. She reached into her tote and pulled out a slim folder. Inside, screenshots, testimonials, HR complaints never resolved, Yelp reviews brushed under the rug, incident reports minimized to protect image. This is just the beginning, she said. And I've seen enough. The room was still. You're going to want to make some immediate decisions, she continued. Because if you don't, the people outside that boardroom will. She stood. The meeting wasn't over. But her message was delivered. Before she left, she turned to the man who had tried to escort her through the terminal earlier. Tell your team at Gate B12 they'll be meeting with me in person. Not HR. Not security. Me. He nodded. Yes, ma'am. And let them know, she added, next time a black woman hands you a first-class ticket, the only thing you should be checking is the seat number. She walked out, quiet and slow. And the weight of her words followed her down the hallway. The door to the staff meeting room at Terminal 4 opened with a quiet click. It wasn't dramatic. No announcement. No security detail. Just Evelyn Monroe. The woman they turned away. The one who was questioned. Delayed. Judged. Now she was back, still dressed in that same navy cardigan, still carrying that same black tote. But everything about her felt different now. The room knew who she was. She walked in alone. The HR manager had gathered the entire ground crew from Gate B12, Carla, the gate agent who asked Evelyn if she was in the right line. Marcus, the shift supervisor who stood by and said nothing. A handful of others who glanced, then looked away. They knew what this was. The corporate office hadn't said much, only that a senior executive wanted to observe and debrief. But when they saw Evelyn enter, the realization hit hard. She didn't sit behind the table at the front of the room. She sat on one of the folding chairs. The same kind they were using. At eye level. On purpose. For a moment, she didn't speak. She let the silence stretch until the weight of it settled on everyone in the room. That kind of silence wasn't awkward. It was earned. And everyone knew why. I came back, Evelyn said finally, her voice calm and measured. Not because I want revenge. But because I want you to remember how easy it was to erase me. No one moved. I walked through the gate carrying a first-class boarding pass. And you looked through me like I didn't exist. Carla shifted in her seat. I didn't know who you were, she said, her voice small. That's the point, Evelyn said. You weren't supposed to. She looked around the room slowly. When I bought into this airline, I told myself I wouldn't be a figurehead. I wanted to understand how passengers are treated, not by policy, but by instinct. What happens when someone walks up without power, without a title? What happens when all they bring is themselves? Marcus cleared his throat. Look, it wasn't personal. No, Evelyn cut in. It was worse. It was automatic. The room stiffened. You didn't hesitate, she said. You didn't ask yourself, is she a doctor? A lawyer? A professor? A mother? A woman who worked hard to get here. You didn't ask anything. You just saw skin. Clothes. A calm expression you thought you could push past. Her voice never rose. But her words were cutting. You saw what you expected to see. And the second it didn't match your image of a first-class passenger, you found reasons to make me prove I belonged. She paused, scanning the room again. I stood there while white passengers walked past me, laughing. You searched my bag. Delayed my entry. Treated me like an error in your system. But the system didn't fail. It worked exactly the way it was trained to. Carla looked down. Evelyn leaned forward. Here's what you didn't know, she said. That flight was the final leg of an internal audit. I didn't choose this gate by accident. I had been receiving complaints, quiet ones, off the record, from black and brown passengers. People treated like they were inconveniences instead of customers. People dismissed before they even stepped on the plane. She let the words land. So I tested the gate myself. And you failed. Marcus shifted again, his voice tight. We followed protocol. Then your protocol needs to change, Evelyn said. Because you made one mistake I won't forget. You assumed silence was agreement. Now she stood. When I sat in seat 1A that morning, I didn't sit there to enjoy luxury. I sat there to remember what it feels like to be reminded, over and over, that no matter how hard we work, we are still questioned. Her hand stayed at her sides. But her presence expanded with every sentence. And now, things will change. Someone whispered, "Are we all getting fired?" Evelyn shook her head. This isn't punishment, she said. It's accountability. She turned to Carla. Would you have stopped me if I were white? Carla looked away. That's the question you'll carry with you, Evelyn said. Not because I want to shame you, but because I want to give you a chance to answer it differently next time. She turned to Marcus. You've worked here 7 years, she said. How many passengers have you seen profiled? Marcus opened his mouth, then closed it. I thought so. Evelyn stepped toward the whiteboard at the front of the room. She picked up a dry erase marker and wrote in bold capital letters. Every seat deserves respect. Then she turned back to them. This terminal will pilot a new training program. Not just about customer service, but about equity. Real equity. We'll review footage. Examine patterns. And when we see bias, we'll confront it. She glanced at Carla again. Then at Joy, the young black gate agent who had witnessed it all in silence. You stayed quiet because you didn't feel safe, Evelyn said. That ends now. Speak up. Be the interruption. Joy's voice was barely a whisper. I wanted to. I thought I'd lose my job. You shouldn't have to choose between your dignity and your paycheck, Evelyn said. From this moment forward, if you see something wrong and speak up, you'll be protected. That's a promise. She took one final look around. This gate, this team, you represent the first human interaction someone has with our airline. If they are met with suspicion instead of welcome, then we've failed before they even sit down. She walked to the door, then paused. Some of you will rise from this. Some won't. But every one of you now carries a decision. She opened the door and walked out. The silence that followed wasn't heavy anymore. It was instructive. Behind her, Carla wiped her eyes. Marcus looked down at his hands. Joy finally sat up a little straighter. And somewhere in the corner of the room, someone quietly whispered the words Evelyn had written on the board. Every seat deserves respect. By the time Evelyn walked back into the corporate tower 2 days later, the headlines had already started writing themselves. Airline CEO mistaken for passenger, faces discrimination from her own staff. Black woman denied first-class seat, turns out she owns the airline. Video of Evelyn Monroe goes viral, sparks industry reckoning. The video clip from Gate B12, less than 90 seconds long, had now reached over 12 million views across platforms. And it wasn't the yelling or violence that gripped people. It was the silence. The stillness. The calm dignity of a woman being asked, again and again, whether she belonged. The comments told their own story. This is why representation matters. I've been treated the same. Just didn't have a platform. She said more in silence than most do with a microphone. But Evelyn hadn't spoken to the press. Not once. And she didn't plan to. Because this story wasn't for headlines. It was for change. In the boardroom that morning, the mood was different. Not fearful. Not tense. Just humbled. The entire executive team was present. Legal, PR of operations, HR. Even the regional leads from other major hubs had flown in. And for once, there was no performance. No buzzwords. Just listening. Evelyn entered, nodded once, and sat at the head of the table. "This isn't about salvaging our image," she began, voice steady. "This is about transforming our identity." She slid a folder across the table. Inside were the first drafts of a policy overhaul. "Effective immediately," she said, "every customer-facing employee, from gate to cabin, will undergo reorientation, not just in hospitality, but in bias training. Not just once, but every year." She turned to the PR lead. "Our next campaign won't be about travel deals. It'll be about values. I want a spotlight on real passengers, real stories, real dignity. If that means losing old money to gain new integrity, so be it." The PR lead nodded, jaw tight. "And the name of the initiative?" someone asked. Evelyn paused, then smiled faintly. "The Belonging Program." She let the silence fill the room again. "We don't just sell flights," she said. "We sell belonging. Every time we check a ticket, we're answering one unspoken question: do I belong here? From now on, the answer must always be yes." A murmur of agreement moved around the room. But Evelyn wasn't finished. "I'm appointing a new internal division," she said. "Community review. Led by someone who understands the stakes. Someone who lived it." The room tilted forward. Curious. Then Evelyn turned to the screen behind her and clicked a button. A new image appeared. A woman's face. Bright-eyed. Nervous. Determined. "Joy Daniels," Evelyn said. "Former gate agent at Terminal 4. Starting Monday, she'll be Director of Community Review." Gasps. Soft ones. Not disbelief, admiration. "She spoke up," Evelyn said. "Not to save her job, but because she knew silence wouldn't protect the next woman who looks like me." Joy, watching via Zoom from her apartment, covered her mouth in shock. Evelyn nodded toward the screen. "Change doesn't begin at the top," she said. "It begins when people at the bottom stop whispering and start speaking." As the meeting adjourned, executives filed out slowly, some in reflection, some in quiet awe. Outside the building, reporters waited, cameras ready, questions flying. But Evelyn didn't stop. She walked past them, through the lobby, and into the waiting car. She didn't need to explain anything to them. The world had already heard her loud and clear, even in silence. 2 weeks later, Evelyn returned to JFK. Not as a mystery passenger, but as herself. The staff recognized her instantly, but this time there was no panic. Just warmth. Deference without performance. Carla approached first, not with excuses, but with a handwritten note. "I've started over," she said softly. "Because of you." Evelyn took the note. "Read it." Then nodded. "No one's asking you to be perfect," she said. "We're asking you to be better." A few hours later, she boarded another first-class seat. Same airline. Different day. As she sat down, a young girl in row 2 peeked over her shoulder. Brown skin. Curly hair. Big eyes filled with questions. "Are you the lady from the video?" she whispered. Evelyn smiled gently. "Yes. I guess I am." "Are you famous now?" Evelyn chuckled. "Only if being seen counts as fame." The girl paused. "You look like my mom." Evelyn leaned closer. "Then your mom must be powerful." The girl smiled wide. Her mother, seated beside her, caught Evelyn's eye and mouthed, "Thank you." Evelyn simply nodded. As the plane pulled away from the gate, Evelyn looked out the window. Same sky. Same clouds. But for the first time in a long time, something felt different. Not just in the air, but on the ground. They didn't need to yell. They didn't need to threaten. They didn't need to demand a seat. They just needed to be seen. And Evelyn Monroe made sure of that. If this story moved you, if you've ever been told you didn't belong, leave a comment and share your truth. Hit that like button to show the world you stand for dignity. And don't forget to subscribe to Disrespected Stories, where every week we bring you powerful narratives that prove the underestimated never stay silent. Because in the end, they don't just claim their seat. They own the plane.